It started as just another political talk show panel. It's one of those typical back-and-forth debates where commentators from both sides try to score points with clever sound bites. Karoline Leavitt was invited for her unapologetic views and bold commentary. Opposite her sat Kash Patel, a former national security official with a calm demeanor and years of service under his belt. The topic of discussion was immigration, and for the first few minutes, the conversation followed the usual script: disagreements over policy, heated yet professional exchanges. But then Karoline, in an attempt to dominate the conversation and undermine Kash's perspective, interrupted him mid-sentence and delivered a line that stunned the entire studio. With a smirk and a dismissive tone, she said, "Maybe you should go back to India." For a second, there was silence. The host froze. The audience didn't know whether to gasp or laugh. It was the kind of moment that revealed far more about the speaker than about the target. Kash Patel didn't respond immediately. He sat quietly for a moment, absorbing what had just been said, his expression unreadable. The air grew tense. The host attempted to steer the conversation in another direction, but it was too late. Everyone had heard it. Kash finally leaned forward and began to speak, not with anger or retaliation, but with clarity and resolve. "Was born in Queens, New York," he began. "I've worked in the Department of Justice, served at the Pentagon, and advised a president. I didn't come here from India. My parents did. They came legally, worked hard, paid taxes, and raised a son who has spent his entire life serving this country." His words were quiet, but they carried immense weight. He continued, "Telling someone who disagrees with you to go back anywhere is not a political statement. It's racism, plain and simple." Asterisk, as his voice rang through the studio, the atmosphere shifted dramatically. The smirks disappeared. Karoline's face hardened, but she said nothing. Kash wasn't finished. "When we use language like that, we reduce citizenship to skin tone. We erase decades of service, sacrifice, and commitment." "My patriotism doesn't need your validation," he said. The audience, once silent, began to clap. Slowly at first, then louder. Some people stood. It was no longer a debate. It had become a lesson, not just in politics, but in dignity. Kash didn't raise his voice. He didn't throw insults. He simply held a mirror up to the moment and let everyone see it for what it was. Asterisk, within hours. The clip was all over social media. TikTok, Twitter, YouTube, every platform was flooded with reactions. People from every walk of life were posting their thoughts, retweeting Kash's speech and condemning Karoline's comment. Hashtags like #GoBackToIndia and #Kash Patel trended nationwide, but not in the way Karoline may have anticipated. Instead of casting Kash as an outsider, the moment highlighted just how American his story really was. Immigrants, veterans, students, and everyday Americans flooded the internet with their own experiences of being told they didn't belong. They saw themselves in Kash, and they saw clearly what Karoline's words represented. Asterisk, Karoline attempted to walk back her comment later. In the day, she posted a message saying her words were taken out of context and that she didn't mean it that way. But the damage was done. The footage was raw and unedited. The context was clear. Sponsors began distancing themselves from her appearances. Event invitations were quietly canceled. A few of her own political allies issued statements without mentioning her name, speaking out against divisive rhetoric. She had become a symbol not of patriotism or free speech, but of the old, tired tactic of using origin as a weapon. Her silence in the face of Kash's response said everything. Asterisk, meanwhile, Kash continued to rise. Not because he attacked anyone, but because he didn't. Because he stood tall when most would crumble or shout. He didn't demand an apology. Didn't ask to be a victim. Instead, he elevated the conversation. "America is not about where your parents were born," he said in a later interview. "It's about what you do with the opportunity that citizenship gives you." He became the subject of editorials and think pieces. High school teachers played his clip in classrooms. Colleges invited him to speak. For many, he had become an example of how to meet ignorance not with rage, but with reason. Asterisk, the media cycle didn't let the moment fade quickly. News outlets replayed the clip daily for a week. Political analysts debated the fallout. Some tried to defend Karoline, saying she misspoke. Others flatly called her words racist. But no one could deny the impact of Kash's reply. It wasn't just his words, it was how he said them. Calm, measured, direct. It felt like a turning point, a rare moment when public discourse shifted. Not because someone shouted the loudest, but because someone spoke with quiet, undeniable power. Kash didn't just win the argument, he redefined the battlefield. Asterisk for young Americans, especially children of immigrants, the moment was personal. They posted videos recounting the first time someone told them to go back to a country they'd never even visited. They wrote about how they used to feel ashamed, confused, or enraged. But now they said they'd remember Kash Patel. He gave us a script, one user posted.
Not to memorize his words, but to see how we can
respond with pride, not pain. That's what made the moment more than just viral, it made it unforgettable. It created a shared reference point for how to face hate without absorbing it. Asterisk Karoline faded from headlines soon after. She stopped making appearances. Her followers shrank. The network that aired the segment issued a vague statement about maintaining respectful dialogue, but didn't mention her name. That silence echoed louder than any apology might have. She had crossed a line and been held accountable not by mobs or outrage, but by the simple, powerful strength of her opponents' character. It was a cultural moment where the tables turned not through anger but through truth. And once that truth was spoken, there was no way to unhear it. Asterisk, the episode eventually became a case study used in universities, in workplace DEI training, in community discussions about race, identity, and speech, not because it was extreme, but because it was typical. What Karoline said had been said to thousands before. What made this moment different was that it was captured, challenged, and dismantled in real time. It showed what courage looks like, what dignity sounds like, and how silence in the face of prejudice isn't neutrality. It's complicity. Kash Patel reminded the nation of that with every word he spoke. Asterisk, by the time the noise died down, one thing had become clear. The insult had backfired. It hadn't diminished Kash. It had amplified him. It hadn't exposed a weakness in him, but in those who still think citizenship can be questioned based on skin or name. His response didn't just defend himself, it uplifted millions. In doing so, he didn't just shock America. He helped it see itself more clearly.